Hello, and welcome back to Thecrimereel. For today's true crime story, we shall be visiting the European country of Italy to look at the events of the 21st of February 2001. The Dinardo family lived in Novi Ligure, a small town in the northwest of Italy. The town has a population of around 27,000 people and is generally seen as a good place to live, work and raise a family. The Dinardos lived on Via Beniamino de Catra in Novi Ligure and were relatively typical of families in the area at that time. 45-year-old Francesco Dinardo and his wife Susie had two children, 16-year-old Erica and 12-year-old Gianluca. Francesco was one of the managers at the Peringotti chocolate factory, which at the time was one of Italy's leading producers of chocolate treats. Susie worked as an accountant and Erica and Gianluca attended local schools. On 21st of February 2001, Susie picked Erica up from school at around 2 p.m. The mother and daughter had lunch together before Erica left to spend the afternoon with her 17-year-old boyfriend Mauro Favaro, more commonly known as Omar. Erica returned home at approximately 7 p.m. that evening and waited for the arrival of her mother, who had gone to pick up her brother Gianluca from his sports practice. Francesco would be late arriving home from work that night as he met up with friends for their weekly game of five-a-side football. At around 8 p.m. that evening, Erica came running from the family home into the street screaming for help. She hammered on her neighbour's front door, and as they came to her aid, she told them that two people had entered her house and had been trying to rob her family. They had assaulted her mother and brother, but she had managed to escape. When the emergency services arrived just minutes later, they found a heartbreaking scene within the family home. Both Susie and Gianluca were dead. They had been stabbed multiple times. Susie was in the kitchen, almost unrecognisable from her wounds. Gianluca was in the bath upstairs, having suffered even more extensive injuries than his mother. A wooden-handled 15cm kitchen knife, which was used in the murders, was found at the house. Erica told the police what she knew. She had been upstairs in her bedroom listening to music on her headphones when she heard her younger brother cry out for help. She left her bedroom and saw that her mother was struggling with two men. Her mother, already bleeding profusely, screamed at Erica to run away. Erica fled via the underground garage. She told the police that the two men who had broken into her home were not Italian, and she guessed that they were from Albania. She estimated that one was in his 40s and the other in his 20s. In recent years, Italy had seen a leap in immigration numbers. There had also been some break-ins which linked back to the immigrant community. So police suspected that the murders could have been at the hands of a known immigrant gang. Following the leads which Erica had given them, the police showed Erica some mugshots of these gangs, which they thought may have been responsible. Erica immediately recognised one of the men as one of the two killers who had entered her house. Media attention immediately focused on threats from immigrants entering the country. The images of a young girl who had witnessed two members of her family being brutally murdered led to a public outcry. Several newspapers demanded a crackdown on illegal immigration. Investigators tracked down and interviewed the man who Erica had identified. He had a very strong alibi, and soon the police, along with the public prosecutor Carlo Carlesi, started to sense that there was more to this investigation than it initially seemed. As bloodstains were analysed at the scene of the crime, it was concluded that due to the distance between the bloody footsteps, Erica had actually walked to get help rather than running, as she had previously stated. In addition, there were no signs of forced entry at the house, and no items had been stolen in this supposed robbery. The murder weapons were the family's own knives. Police questioned why Erica had left the house through the underground garage rather than the much shorter route of going straight out of the front door. Evidence started to point to the fact that Erica had not been telling the truth about the events of the night of 21st of February 2001. But investigators were having a hard time believing that this 16-year-old girl could have been involved in such a brutal crime. The public prosecutor asked for surveillance of Erica's phone calls. 24 hours after the murders, she was heard talking to her boyfriend Omar, telling him not to worry as they would never get found out because she was the only witness. The following day, Erica and Omar were brought in for questioning. In between the police interviews, the two teenagers were left alone in an interrogation room. Unknown to them, the room contained both microphones and cameras. Erica and Omar not only started to talk about the murders, but at times even mimicked the actions used to stab Erica's mother and brother. They calmly joked about what had happened that evening and were heard discussing what they should wear for the funerals the following day in order to look appropriate. On the evening of Friday, 23rd of February 2001, both Erica and Omar were charged with the murders of Susie and Gianluca. At this point they turned on each other, both claiming that they were innocent and the other person was responsible for the murders. Although initially there seemed to be no reasonable explanation or motive for the crime, police eventually established what had happened that evening. Both teenagers seemed to have comfortable middle-class upbringings. They were likeable, had plenty of friends, doing well at school and seemed well liked by their teachers. To everyone, they appeared to be normal, well-adjusted young adults. Erica was close to her brother and enjoyed spending time with him. Susie had some concerns about the intensity of her daughter's relationship with Omar, believing that this relationship was too intense, as the two had become virtually inseparable. However, these concerns were not strong enough for Susie to intervene, and she believed that the initial intensity of a teenager's first love would soon start to calm down. There were the run-of-the-mill parent-child arguments, but nothing that would have been out of place in millions of households across the globe. The only conceivable motive was that Erica wanted to eliminate her family so that she could use her inheritance to roam the world with Omar. Unknown to their parents, both Erica and Omar had started dabbling in illegal drugs. The forensic teams, along with those conducting the interviews, were able to piece together the events of that night. When Susie returned from sports practice with Gianluca that evening, Omar was already hiding in the bathroom, ready to carry out their plan. Susie and Erica started to argue in the kitchen, and Erica grabbed one of the family's kitchen knives, stabbing Susie with it. As Susie tried to defend herself from the attack, Omar ran into the room. Erica and Omar held Susie down and stabbed her over 40 times. Hearing the commotion downstairs, Gianluca decided to see what was happening. He walked in on his sister and her boyfriend brutally murdering his mother. Gianluca was absolutely terrified. Erica and Omar tried to reassure him that he was safe and that they would not harm him. Gianluca turned to run away, and either Erica or Omar lashed out with a knife and stabbed the young boy. Gianluca continued to run and hid in the bathroom. Erica and Omar followed him. They then proceeded to try to strangle him, and when they could not manage this, attempted to get him to eat rat poison. When Gianluca refused, they tried to drown him before eventually stabbing him over 50 times. Gianluca fought as hard as he could but died a drawn-out and extremely painful death. The teenagers had carefully planned out the murders, but events had escalated out of control very quickly. They had previously purchased rat poison and gloves, showing that the crimes were premeditated. They had also planned to murder Francesco, but after the exertion of having inflicted nearly 100 stab wounds, were physically exhausted and concerned that they would not have the strength to overpower Francesco when he returned home. Erica and Omar then came up with a plan to stage an attempted robbery and to blame the murders on immigrants who, due to the political climate in Italy at that time, could act as convenient scapegoats for them. However, this plan was badly thought through and full of holes which would lead to their quick arrest. While in custody, Erica and Omar went through extensive psychological testing. It was determined that Erica was the dominant personality in the relationship. She was diagnosed with having a narcissistic personality psychotic disorder and a split personality. Omar was diagnosed as having a dependent personality disorder. Where Erica led, Omar would follow. Erica persuaded Omar to take part in her plan in order to prove his love for her. Francesco, in the impossible position of mourning his wife and son who had died at the hands of his daughter, made the decision to stand by Erica. He initially believed that Omar had been the driving force behind the murders, but when this was disproved, he believed that there must have been some extreme trigger to make his daughter behave in that way. The joint trial began on November the 28th, 2001. Erica and Omar's attorneys voted for a fast-track trial. This is one which takes significantly less time, as generally no witnesses are called. This fast-track trial carries an automatic 1/3 reduction to any sentence. The defence lawyers entered a plea of temporary mental infirmity. This plea was rejected. As Erica was 16 and Omar 17 at the time of their crimes, there was no option for them to be given life sentences. On Friday, 14th of December 2001, Erica was sentenced to 16 years and Omar to 14 years. Their sentencing was met with mixed opinion. Many believed it was far too lenient, whilst others felt that, particularly in view of their ages, their sentences should have been lighter and aimed more towards rehabilitation. Francesco tried to get on with his life. He moved back into the family home and resumed his job at the chocolate factory. He would phone his daughter once a week during her time in prison. It is reported that Susie's mother also found a way to forgive her granddaughter. Omar's parents could not deal with the publicity surrounding the case. They moved away from the area and changed their names to avoid the publicity. Both Omar and Erica continued with their education whilst in prison. Neither of them served their full sentences, and they were released on parole in 2011 and 2012 respectively. Omar has tried to get on with his life and publicly apologised for his role in the crimes in an interview after his release. It is also believed that Erica, with the support of her father, has moved on with her life and is now married. Any further details of their life since prison are unknown. That concludes the story of the Dinardo family. Thanks very much for listening to that. Please add any comments down below. I'll be interested to read them. The 7 continents have been covered. Joshua Curtis believes that there should be some more continents, but last time I checked, there's still only 7. I hope you've enjoyed this experience with travelling around the world. We must have picked up some air miles, but not too many stamps in our passport. It's time for me to drop the mic because we've completed the challenge. Thanks for listening to the Thecrimereel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst, I didn't actually drop the mic. Why would I risk breaking that? It was a broken mobile phone. So I've turned up for 7 days in a row. I wonder if I'll turn up on day 8 as well. I wonder. Maybe you'll come back to see. Goodbye.